Welcome to Seeking the Overlap, the podcast where we're creating a more connected world, one conversation at a time. I'm connection strategist, professional friend maker, and your host, Baily Hancock. Hello, my friends. It is Baily, and today it's going to be a solo episode. We haven't done one of these in a little while, and I have some things I want to tell you. I've been doing so much reflecting since releasing the first 10 episodes of this season. I have learned so much from my guests. Truly, I expected to pick up a few things here and there about connection, but I was not at all prepared to actually completely be changed by the conversations that I've had this season. And that's not hyperbole. I really mean that. I went into this season assuming that I was going to create a show teaching you how to connect better with other people because I've got that figured out. Right? I've been doing this my whole life. I've made a career out of it. Every job I've ever had has relied upon my skills in connecting with other people. So I thought I was good. I brought on a bunch of people who have very particular bits of information and knowledge about connection. So whether it was an author talking about the science behind connection, or it's a storytelling expert talking about what happens when you actually are really present with somebody and you're in it together, or a therapist talking about self-love, all of that stuff, I figured, okay, cool. We'll have them on. They'll round out my knowledge, and together we'll be able to provide my listeners with a well-rounded approach to connecting with others. What actually happened was with every single interview, I'm asking these questions and, I go into each interview with at least an outline of what I want to talk about. And I have some questions prepared, but I mostly like to sort of improv my way through it because I feel like that best serves the conversation. I like to be a little bit more flowy with it. Well, what was happening was I would start with my first question and then start to realize wait, I need to know more about this thing that you're talking about because this feels like something I don't know. And I'm super curious about it. So that was happening with every single episode. And you still haven't heard a bunch of interviews that I've done for this season. Those are coming next. They are incredible. But the interviews that I did for these first 10 episodes were focused on connection with self, which I originally did not plan to have a focus on connection with self in this season at all. But as I was doing these interviews, that's the conversation I was having over and over again. And I realized in retrospect, that's because it's the conversation I needed to have personally. So whether it was talking with Richard Lee Tai about his people-pleasing tendencies getting in the way of true connection, or talking with Jasmine about how if you have negative internal self-talk, you're not going to be able to form a deep connection with somebody else because you don't even know who you are. You don't even know your own likes and dislikes. Every conversation I had just kept hitting at something within me that felt unknown, unexplored, and deeply true and resonant. So I've been sitting with these conversations over the last few months. I listen to every episode when it airs as well, because a lot of the times I don't really remember the specifics of the conversation because I was so present in it. And they've hit me one after the next. I think, wow, no, this one's my favorite. Nope, just kidding. This one's my favorite. And I realize I cannot choose. They are all my favorite because they've all meant something different to me. So I tell you this because since beginning the process of interviewing people in June of 2024, I released the first episode September 15th, my birthday of 2024. And over the last 4 months now, a lot has changed for me personally regarding how I think about the connections I have and the way that I've been connecting with people for my entire life, truly. So I want to give you a little bit of background on me. I have been a joiner of clubs and activities and teams since I was old enough to ask my mom to sign me up for stuff. I was in my first dance class at 3 years old. I played every single sport you can imagine with the exception of basketball and volleyball because I'm 5 feet tall and I kind of knew to cut my losses before I started there. But I was in Girl Scouts. I was in dance from 3 till high school. I did a million clubs and extracurriculars in middle and high school and college and grad school. I mean, I'm talking everything from yearbook to drama to teen court to Students Against Drunk Driving to everything you can do. Sophomore year of high school, I was in 8 different activities and I had a part-time job. And I was in the International Baccalaureate program, which, if you're not familiar, it's like AP classes, but never ending and nonstop, not just exams at the end of the year, like projects and presentations. It's a lot. Like, it's a huge course load in high school. And I was doing all of this. Now, on the surface, the reason I thought I was such an extracurricular floozy, which is what I always kind of referred to myself as, was because I wanted to look excellent on college applications. I wanted to have a stacked resume. I wanted to have a well-rounded skill set. And I just thought, well, this is fun. I love learning about a bunch of different things and getting to meet a bunch of different people. So that's my conscious thought my entire life. I was like, this is why I'm a joiner. I just like to be part of things. I like to have a lot of friends and I like to be able to know a lot of people. And it really felt to me like it was the quickest way to be accepted. And that was true. All those things were true. But in retrospect, what I realized I was doing was seeking love and acceptance and belonging and connection everywhere I could find it. I was looking under every stone and around every corner to find my people. And, I always thought it was interesting growing up when people would have best friends because I had people I was close to, don't get me wrong, but I had way more surface level relationships than I ever had super close, tight knit best friends. I was always friends with groups of people. And I've told this story before, but in high school at lunchtime, I would literally go to like 3 to 5 different tables in the cafeteria and have like 10 minutes of lunch with different groups of friends because I was just friends with a bunch of different people. And the interesting thing about my approach to joining a bunch of clubs for acceptance and connection and expanding my friend groups, I didn't know what a network was back then, but I was effectively growing my network, building my community of people. My approach to this, which I never realized I had approach until somewhat recently, was I would pretty much shape shift myself to match whatever I thought that particular group of people would receive best. And how that played out was like on the lacrosse team, I would be really feisty and competitive. And then when I would go volunteer at the hospital, I'd be really empathetic and kind and gentle. When I'd be in student government or teen court or any of these more like logic based, achievement based groups, I would be very driven and organized and act like a leader. In yearbook and drama, I'd be really creative and I would be really innovative in my approaches and I'd be very charismatic and you get it, right? Like I'm kind of bringing different pieces of my personality and myself to each of these different spaces. And I think that's somewhat normal, right? It's normal to kind of adapt who you are to the crowd that you're in front of. But I did it in such a way that it was almost formulaic. So there was kind of an art form to this fitting in for me. I have always been an accent chameleon, meaning like if I'm talking to somebody and they're from the South, I'll start kind of talking like I'm from the South and I like won't mean to, but I'll catch myself and I'll be like, Baily, that is not your accent. You need to calm down. But it's never intentional. It's just this natural mirroring that I do. I will also match somebody's speaking cadence. So if they're a fast talker, I'm a fast talker. If they're a slow talker, I'm a slow talker. I'll mirror their body language. I'll listen for clues about things that they like, where they're from, like little demographic data about them. And I will forever seek the overlap. I will try and find what is in our overlap on our 2 circles on the Venn diagram so that I can relate to them better. And all of these things are beautiful. I love this about me. I really do. But for a lot of my life, that adaptation and shape shifting and chameleon behavior was almost always to the other person's benefit. It always allowed them to feel seen and safe with me, and almost never allowed me to feel seen and safe with them. Because what I was presenting to them wasn't the full picture. What I was giving them was what I thought they wanted to get. And this can be dangerous over time, especially when you're younger, because you can lose yourself in other people, or You can never find out who you are to begin with if you're always pouring yourself into somebody else's container, which is what I was doing. There was another more insidious factor at play here as well. So, in addition to shape shifting into who I thought they wanted me to be, I was also presenting them with a much more polished, perfect, easygoing presence than was actually true for me. I would figure out, okay, what is the version of me that they're going to like and accept and want to be around the most? That's who I'm going to give to them. And then as I got older, it was that plus how can I be the most impressive version of myself for this person? Whether that was like in a job interview or it was for a teacher or a professor or just trying to make friends as an adult, I would give people this manufactured, polished version of myself in addition to making them feel really comfortable and safe with me because I would mirror them just enough that they felt comfortable and not so much that they thought I was outright copying them. I didn't even really realize that I was doing this, but really what I was trying to do was avoid being rejected, which is, I mean, who doesn't want to not be rejected? Like, that's humanity 101. Nobody likes to be rejected. And I think this really kind of kicked off in late elementary school when the mean girls started mean girling and people started having sleepovers that didn't include everybody. And these girls would come back to school on Monday and they'd have all these inside jokes and they'd be laughing. And if I wanted back in, I had to sort of play along and laugh with them and sort of act like I was in on the joke, even though I wasn't. So I think that this thing, this fear of rejection and fear of being left out really kicked in at about like age 10 and never really went away, to be honest. And I did this from elementary to middle school to high school and then college and beyond. I was always trying to be whoever people wanted me to be so that I didn't get left out. Now, what I wasn't factoring in was whether I even wanted to be accepted by a particular person, right? I was just sort of like, well, I want everybody to like me. Everybody must like me. Everybody must want to be my friend. And, then social media comes along and it's that times a billion, right? It's like, I don't ever want to post anything that's going to offend somebody. I don't want to have too hot of a take because I don't want people to not want to follow me or I don't want people to not want to like me and comment on my stuff and share my stuff. And I think you probably likely know what happens when you try to be everything for everyone. You're nothing for nobody, right? You're sort of just bland and you don't have an opinion of your own, or if you do, it's buried so far below these layers of fitting in that it's almost impossible to find. So bringing this back to present day, as I'm having these conversations with all these different guests of mine for this show, the things that kept coming up were these various barriers to connection that I'd never considered, such as perfectionism, people pleasing, lack of presence, lack of embodiment, lack of connection with self. And I'm a very reflective person. I've always journaled. I've always tried to ask myself the hard questions and really be very introspective. But what I wasn't realizing was that because I had spent most of my life connecting with people in that manner that I connected with them, which is mirroring back who they are and making them like me effectively, I had never really tried to present me as a whole package to people. I'd never really tried to show up as my messy, imperfect human self because that just felt just out of the question. So as I'm having these conversations and I'm hearing over and over that those pieces are really integral to deep, fulfilling, meaningful connection, alarm bells started going off in my mind. And I realized that while I had a vast network of human beings who would say they knew me, the depth was just not there for the bulk of them. And I had been feeling this over the last few years. Specifically, I've had quite a few friendship fadeaways where they just kind of peter out and there's really nothing to be said for them. No fight was had. And I've had some massive friendship explosions where we were no longer friends in that moment. Like big fight, it's over. And that bothered me, of course, because how can it not? But I came to realize that, like, oh, we were no longer aligned because I was beginning little by little to start to show up as more of me. I think the closer to 40 I got, the more I started naturally doing this, where I was like peeling off these layers. And again, this was very subconscious until I started the podcast. Once I started the podcast, it all became a lot more clear that that's what was happening. And I will tell you, that is a downside to being more authentically you. That is definitely something that will happen. I can almost guarantee you, as you show up more and more like your true self, the people that liked you for the version of you that you gave them before might realize that they've been baited and switched. And it was not on purpose. I think a lot of the times we do this for all the reasons that I've mentioned, but it can feel disjointed if I'm on the receiving end of this performance that I was giving people. And then suddenly, this person I thought I was friends with and knew is starting to kind of act like a different version of herself. You have two choices. You can either evolve alongside her, you can either evolve your friendship together, or you can sort of fade out and be like, okay, we're just not aligned anymore. And that's okay. That's actually way more typical to have friends come and go than it is to have the exact same friends your entire life. That is very special and unique. And if you've got that, that's amazing. I have that too. I have friends that I've been friends with since I was 10 years old still, but we've evolved alongside each other. And most of the other people that we were friends with way back then are no longer in our lives. And again, very typical. So as I started to realize that the bulk of my connections were much more surface level because of me and the way that I went about connecting with people than deep and authentic and meaningful, it sort of made me realize why for so long I was a bit confused by the fact that I had so many friends, quote unquote friends and connections, and still would often feel deeply alone and deeply unseen and unrecognized by the people in my life. So, as these puzzle pieces are starting to sort of fit together here, I realized that, you know, I was the girl who knew everyone, who nobody else really knew very well. So, I've started to try and change that. And let me tell you, it is both a very simple and easy fix, and it's also something I think I'm going to be working on for maybe the rest of my life. I hope not, but I've spent 40 years doing it one way and now I'm trying to turn the tides in a different direction, and it's just hard. Human behavior is hard. Changing your mindset and your neural pathways is hard. And it's worth it, but it is a challenge. And so the last few months, as I've met new people, I've sort of been practicing unmasking. And usually the term unmasking is in regards to neurodiverse people kind of taking off the mask that they wear in order to feel accepted socially by others. I'm saying unmasking to mean that and removing your mask of perfectionism, removing the people pleasing mask, removing the mask of needing to have this polished, perfect persona in order to be accepted. And I think most of us are wearing a lot of masks, so many masks. I have no idea how many masks I have on. I'm only aware of the ones that I've become aware of. And those masks for me absolutely are the perfectionist, the overachiever, the ambitious, goal-driven, achiever who's just deeply wanting success to be loved and accepted by, my parents, my authority figures that I grew up with, people that are not even paying any attention to what I'm doing these days. I'm still trying to achieve for their love, which is very silly, but all of us do it. And another fun little surprise for me in the last month is I was diagnosed as autistic. I haven't talked about this at all yet anywhere because I haven't really had a lot of time to process it. I got the results, I think, a couple days before Christmas, and then Christmas happened in the holidays and all of the chaos of that. And then the LA fires happened. And I just really have not had the time to sit with it. But I got diagnosed originally because my son Archie was diagnosed 3 years ago. And since then, I've been on this rabbit hole, deep learning path of learning all about what it means to be autistic. And thank God for the internet in some respects. The internet has shown me so many examples of other women who were late diagnosed, and I saw myself in them. So I got an assessment. I'll put the link to the place where I was assessed in the show notes, but Got my results, and it's like, ding, 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 you are level 1 autistic, which means lowest support needs, was able to likely be highly masking throughout my life and fit in. And that just tracks. It tracks with all of this. So, how this plays out for me now is yes, I have the mask of perfectionist. I have the people pleasing mask. I have all of those other masks. And I actually have a reason for why all of that was happening. I have a reason for why I was so formulaic about connecting with other people. It is an incredibly autistic thing to try and create a strategy and formula for fitting in. I will likely share so much more about this as I have more to talk about, but I will tell you, it made me feel like, oh, well, of course that's why I did that. Of course that's why I am the way that I am. This makes perfect sense. So I am officially entering my unmasking era. And I'm at the very beginning of this. So this is a process I will absolutely bring you all along with because I think there are a lot of women in my life, especially and out there in the world, that may also be highly masking, undiagnosed neurodiverse people, whether it's ADHD, autism, two of those combined. They call it ADHD. There's so many versions out there, right? Like neurodiversity is a big, beautiful world full of all kinds of different combinations of things. But my version is autism. So I will bring you along on this. But what's really interesting is, I am figuring out how to show up as my most authentic self with every new interaction I have with people. It is going to be a process, but I do have some things that I've learned thus far that are really helping me. So, the first one of those things is making sure that I have a self connection practice. For me, my self connection comes through writing and speaking. So, I am part of a writer's group. It's called the Writer's Cottage. I'll link to that as well. We meet for an hour twice a week to just get some writing done. I will often use that time to just kind of dump out my thoughts and give myself a writing prompt and go from there. I'm also part of the Blue Sky Black Sheep writing group, which I've mentioned on the pod before, which is a little more structured. And that's where a lot of my deep reflection writing comes out. I also go on self-talk walks pretty much daily where if I'm kind of stuck in my head or I can't quite parse out the way that I feel about something or why I'm feeling a certain way, I will open my voice notes app on my phone. And on my walk through my neighborhood, I will just have a conversation with myself. I will ask myself, so what's going on? Like, what's the deal? Why are you feeling this way? And I'll just respond as if I'm talking to a friend. And I'm such a verbal processor that this really is the quickest way for me to get into the juicy stuff of like what's happening in my head. I need to get it out of my mouth so that I can do something with it. And then my little hack for actually using this information to do something with it and kind of transmute it into something else or move through it is I will take the transcript of my voice note and copy and paste it into ChatGPT and ask it to tell me what I was talking about. Summarize this, give me key points. Are there any next steps that I mentioned? And then I have that as a tangible thing that I can reference when I want to do something with that possibly new information. So I touch base with myself a lot between writing and my self-talk walks. And I have, of course, a robust note in my notes app that I'm just always doing brain dumps of ideas that come to me and realizations that I have and all of that. And it's really helpful for me to be able to stay really current on what is in my head, what is going on in my life, what are my current likes and dislikes and interests, and what are my big goals and my real important values in my life. So that self-connection helps me stay current on who I am today, not who I know myself to be from years and years ago, but who I am right now. So I kind of keep that close to the surface so that I can access it. So that when I am talking with somebody, whether it's a old friend, a new friend, or a stranger, I have it at the ready. It's like already pulled out of the attic of my brain. It's already dusted off. It's really easily accessible so that if we're in conversation and I want to reference something that I've just recently kind of discovered or been thinking about, it's right there. All I got to do is grab it and bring it out. And that helps people get to know the me of right now so much better. And it helps me identify the people that want to get to know the me of today that much better. So self-connection is incredibly important for being able to show up as your most authentic, which to me, authentic just means truthful, the most honest, the most transparent, the most real version of myself. Another tip is when you are in conversation with somebody, being all the way there. So Michael Cass and I talked about this. Sophie Allison and I talked about this, like practicing presence while talking to somebody is one of the most amazing ways to feel like totally warm and fuzzy and filled up by the end of that conversation as opposed to depleted. So I can tell the difference between when I'm having a conversation with somebody and we're just shooting the shit and keeping it real light and not going deep. That exhausts me. Whereas if I can have a conversation with somebody about a topic that I'm really fascinated by and curious by, that's going to make me so excited and it's going to make me feel really enthusiastic. And, this is a very neurodiverse trait, like to info dump on somebody about a special interest of mine, which, oh my God, no kidding. I have so many special interests and astrology is one of them. I just did this to two friends of mine recently. Shout out Amanda and Allie for being on the receiving end of this. But they made the mistake of asking me a simple question about astrology. And like 45 minutes later, I had tried to explain the entire system of the modality to them. And maybe they got it, maybe they didn't. But I was in such a flow state. So I left that conversation like jazzed, totally like riled up in a good way. And I don't know how they felt about it. Sometimes the lack of ability to recognize social cues also gets me. There's a lot of things where in retrospect, I'm like, duh, Baily, of course you're autistic. Why did you miss this? But again, that's a conversation for a different episode. So if you can show up fully present with somebody and be embodied while you're there, and embodiment is really just being in your body. So what does that actually mean? If you're talking with somebody and your mind is on, oh, I need to order groceries. I need to, do laundry tonight so that I have this thing for tomorrow. Oh, crap. Did I ever return that thing? Like when your brain is running its to-do list in your head while you're talking to somebody, you are not in your body. You are in your head. So embodiment is shutting those voices off as much as you can and really being in that present moment with the other person. And if you haven't listened to episode 10 yet with Michael Cass, that conversation got me so excited because it was talking about neural coupling and what can happen when you trust that there's a third thing that will come out of your conversation if you can both really be in it together. And I live for those moments. I live for the goosebumps moments of just having a conversation with somebody where you're like, oh my God, yes, yes. Oh my God, me too. Oh, no way. Like, what about this? Oh my God, I've never heard of that. Like, oh, that is the juicy, good conversation connection stuff that I truly live for. So self-connection, embodiment, presence. And then there is this other thing that I haven't quite talked about with anybody yet, but it's the faith that when you show up as your true, authentic self, as you are today, and you let people see you, you let yourself be a little vulnerable. You share a little bit more of your circle on the Venn diagram with them than maybe you usually do. You have to have the faith that when you do that, when you put yourself out there like that, which is scary, I'm not going to lie to you, the rejection looms when you do that. It is much more likely that you will get rejected by doing this. But if you don't do this, it is much more likely that you will never find your real people. You might just keep attracting people that like you for the version of you that you're giving them, which you and I both know is not the whole version of you. Right? It's not the truest version of you. And take it from somebody that did this for 40 years. It doesn't feel nearly as good as when you connect with somebody and you show up as whatever weirdo you are, like your most you, and they love that you. That feels a bazillion times better than those other connections that like you good enough for the version of you that you gave them. So you have to have faith that by doing this, you will find your people so much easier. It's not to say that you're going to find a ton of them. And look, that's not the point. right? I was going for quantity over quality for the bulk of my life, but I don't want that anymore. I would much rather have fewer, deeper, more meaningful relationships than a ton of surface level friends. It's just not worth it to me. Have faith that by doing this, putting yourself out there, you will attract your people so much easier. And then those relationships will have such deeper roots than the surface level ones that you will build the way that I used to do it. I want to tell you a quick little story about palm trees in LA. Stay with me. So I recently found out that all of those tall, skinny palm trees that you see all over Los Angeles, whether you live here or you've seen it on TV, Los Angeles is synonymous with tall, skinny palm trees. At least it was in my mind. I found out not that long ago that those palm trees are not native to Los Angeles. They were brought in mostly about 100 years ago in the 20s as a way to create this oasis in Los Angeles. And of course, the film industry was a big part of this. They're like, we want to make LA look like this desert oasis. And so they planted all these beautiful palm trees. No problem, right? Well, the problem is, apparently, most palm trees have a lifespan of about 100 years. And when that 100 years, give or take, is up, their little palm tree heads fall off and they'll have to be pulled out and new ones have to be put in. Because when it's not a native species, it's not meant to be there forever, right? And so, how this relates to this conversation is don't be a palm tree in LA. I was planting myself in all kinds of climates, in all kinds of communities with all kinds of people that I didn't naturally thrive in. I could survive for a while being that version of me. I could fake it long enough that, maybe a real friendship would develop and then slowly but surely I could like show them who I really was. But like I said, I've lost a good handful of friends that weren't here for that. So rather than planting yourself in a climate that doesn't actually support your growth or your longevity or your happiness, find the environments and the people that want you as a palm tree there. Because then you never have to worry about suddenly having your head fall off, in however many years, because you weren't meant to be there in the first place. The moral of the story is not everyone is for you, and you are certainly not for everyone. Okay? And I'm just going to play that part back to myself anytime I'm starting to panic about, but what if they don't like me? If they don't like me, that's okay. They're not for me. The better question is, what if they love me, but only if I show them my real self? What if I show up as this polished version that I've been doling out to people for 40 years and they're like, meh, I could take her or leave her. But had I shown them my real self, they'd be like, oh my God, there you are. There you are. My future best friend, right? So let me just end on this note. To be loved for who you really are is infinitely more gratifying and soul exploding than being liked for who you're not. Okay? That's the episode for today. I just wanted to give you an update on all of the things that have sort of started shifting in my life because of this first half of season 1 of this podcast. I hope that this show has meant something to you so far. If it has, will you please tell me? I very rarely get to hear from listeners, and a listener just recently sent me a beautiful note on LinkedIn. Shout out Jenny for that. It truly made me want to get myself back in front of my editing software and get out the next episode, because she told me how much she's enjoying it, how much it meant to her to hear these conversations. And that reminded me, oh, right, I love doing this and I find it important too. But if you're enjoying it, please send me a note. You can find me all over the internet at Baily Hancock. Truly, I'm everywhere. Whatever your preferred means of communication is, reach out. Tell me what you like about it. Tell me if there's a conversation I haven't had yet that you're dying to hear. If you know somebody that you think would make a great guest to fit in with this conversation, I'm super open to that. I am very picky with who I have on the show because I have this idea in mind of what I want to talk about and the kind of people I want to talk to about it. But please, I will take recommendations happily. If it's the right fit, then they'll be on the show. Thank you for listening. Thank you for continuously telling people about this show. And just thank you for wanting to connect better with other people and yourself. I think this world would be a much more beautiful place if people took the time to really sit with themselves and connect more deeply with themselves and others. And that's the point of this show. That's the point of the book that I'm finally starting to write. It's connecting deeply in a deeply disconnected world because my God, if there was ever a time where we need this, these hands-on practical tips, it is right now. You guys, it is right now. So thank you. Thank you for doing this work. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your support. I am so grateful to you all, and to be continued. Thanks for listening to this episode of Seeking the Overlap. I would be so grateful if you would take a second to rate, review, and subscribe. It really does help others discover the show. And if you share this episode on social, be sure to tag me at Baily Hancock so I can send you some love. Until next time, happy connecting.